Hey everyone, John Bose for another episode of Bose 3 Podcast. I am here with a great guest. One of the hugest things that has changed in political activity is the introduction of community television. Massachusetts, every single state has one. This is one of the legends. Introduce yourself.
Well, legend, I'm not sure about that, but I am, I think you could call me a veteran television journalist, or at least community television journalist. I've been on the air at BNN TV in Boston. That's the Boston Neighborhood Network. It's community access television, but it's been around for 25 some years, and because it is centered in the city, they're wired into 150,000 cable households. So
Their programs are carried all over the place.
Well, we get potentially a big audience. Now I've been doing a political talk show there for the last, hate to date myself, but 22 years I think it is now. It's called Talk of the Neighborhoods. It's currently on every Thursday night from 7 to 8, and I usually break that up into 2 half-hour segments. And over the course of all those years, I've had on hundreds of guests, maybe over 1,000. I'm not sure. I've never counted them up.
But if you're doing every Thursday for 15 years, that's not a small group.
No, it is not. And a lot. And during that time, of course, the use of community access television has changed somewhat, but it's still, a mainstay. Television isn't what it once was, but it still is an important source of information and news. And over the course of that, as I said, I've interviewed a lot of first-time candidates. So
we've seen later in life.
I've seen it all, so to speak.
So, Joe, how did you get started? What was the first thing?
Well, I'm a former newspaper reporter and editor. For about 10 years, was a news reporter, and then also helped to start a weekly newspaper, which I edited. These are in Boston neighborhoods. But because Boston is so political, it was kind of a natural fit. Now, I also I'm originally from the Midwest, and came from a political family, so to speak. I'm like what the version of the Dorchester kid who distributes flyers when they're 7 years old or whatever it is, door to door. Well, it's not quite that, but
you had a cousin run for office.
Yes, I had, and I had a cousin that ran for office, and my father was chairman of the Democratic Party in our county for 30 years, something like that. But so anyway, and rather steeped in history, dating myself here, but I go back to George McGovern's 1972 campaign for president. I campaigned for him in Wisconsin, which he won, and California, which he won.
So you were his good luck charm.
Yeah, I guess so, except it didn't quite work out in the general election, and but that's some of my history. Anyway, I found news when I moved to Massachusetts, and found it was really a love of mine, and got into it as a newspaper reporter. And then as I moved on from newspapers, I found this, which was live.
So in the late 80s, early 90s, community TV started.
Right, yes. And then in 95, I believe it was, after the 95 city council election, is the first show I did. And I still have some tape from somewhere. I have boxes and boxes. Yeah, pretty close, and so I go all the way back. But, I had pretty much everybody who's, been elected in the recent past in Massachusetts as a guest. And I've had some people that were first-time candidates that went on to much bigger and better things.
You were saying a little rep race?
Yeah.
You interviewed a few people?
Yeah, I'm thinking in particular, not to go on too long about this, but, and this would have been, I'm guessing, late 1990s. There was a state rep race to replace Jim Brett, who's now the president of New England Council. But at that time, it was a Dorchester seat, included Savin Hill and several of those precincts right along the bay there. And it drew 4 or 5 really good candidates, very strong candidates.
I've noticed that Boston races draw some really strong candidates.
And including first-time candidate Martha Coakley, which some of your reviewers, maybe most of them know, went on to become Attorney General, and then was a candidate for the U.S. Senate, and again a candidate for governor. Well, when she first ran, and I'm not sure if it was her first television appearance, but it had to be amongst her first. She was extremely well spoken and a very good candidate. But
now she had been an attorney, so she has.
Yes. She wasn't, totally green, but so she was well spoken. But it turns out that doesn't always guarantee you election.
No.
Certainly in Boston. Now, also in that race was a young labor organizer or labor official, very, very green, very, very uncomfortable. I'm almost certain it was his first time ever on television. He would tell you the same thing if you asked him. You may know him, Marty Walsh.
Who is now the mayor of Boston and is considered one of the big political figures.
Yes, certainly up and coming nationally too. And Marty remembers that. As a matter of fact, we've talked about it relatively recently, and we had some laughs about it because he was nervous as a cat, as they would say, and he's not alone, John. Right. That's true for a lot of, especially first-time candidates. Lots of times their appearance on community access television is the first time they've ever appeared. Now, maybe less so now in the age of social media, but still.